After a brutal slaughter in a small town, an old hunter is forced out of hiding to face horrors that refuse to stay buried. I'm Mr. Midnight Hollow, your terrifying host. If you're already part of our pack, your support means the world to us. Each like, comment, and share helps uncover more stories like this, or subscribe to see what rises from the depths of darkness and unfolds before you. Now, let's begin. Eureka, California, had always worn its fog like a second skin. Nestled between towering redwoods and the bitter Pacific, the town clung to its isolation like an old secret. But secrets rot when kept too long. Deputy Marshal Clay Mercer stared at the ruin of what once was the Caldwell farmhouse. The call had come in just before dawn, neighbors complaining of screaming and dogs howling near the tree line. By the time law enforcement arrived, there was nothing left to save. The walls were smeared with something darker than blood, claw marks etched into the wood as though steel had tried to tear its way through pine. Clay gagged behind his cruiser. In the barn, a half-eaten horse still twitched. The youngest Caldwell, a boy named Matthew, had been found, or what was left of him, thrown 30 feet from the house, his torso ripped open, ribs cracked like wishbones. Sheriff Donahue lit a cigarette with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. No goddamn bear did this. Clay didn't answer, because he already knew who to call. 20 miles out, hidden deep within a stretch of old-growth forest that even the locals avoided, lived Silas Weatherford. No one had seen him in over a decade. Rumors swirled. Some said he'd gone mad after losing his family in the Colorado outbreak back in '92. Others said he was a killer who'd made peace with death. But the old guard knew the truth. Silas wasn't just a hunter. He was the last man standing from a war most people didn't even know existed. Clay pulled up to the cabin as the sun struggled against the canopy. The air smelled of moss, burnt oil, and gunpowder. Animal bones hung from the trees like warning signs. He knocked once, then twice. "You're late," a voice croaked behind him. Silas Weatherford was a tower of sinew and scars, wrapped in a canvas jacket stained with age and blood. His beard was tangled, streaked with gray, and one eye was clouded over white, blind. But the other gleamed with purpose. "We got a problem," Clay said, handing him the crime scene photos. Silas didn't blink. "Not a problem, a hunt." Clay hesitated. "They say you've killed over 1,000 of them." Silas slid a silver-plated shotgun from behind his door. "I stopped counting after New Mexico. Numbers don't matter. Smell does." Clay looked confused. "They leave behind a scent like copper and rot. And fear. You can smell fear when it comes from the lungs of prey." He shouldered a weathered duffel bag filled with tools no ordinary hunter would use. Silver stakes, wire traps, salt canisters, a bone-handled knife that shimmered like moonlight. Clay caught a glimpse of runes carved into the blade. He didn't ask. Back at the Caldwell property, Silas moved through the wreckage without emotion. He knelt beside a dark, wet patch near the living room hearth and rubbed the blood between his fingers. "Still warm," he murmured. He walked out into the yard, eyes scanning the tree line. "They're not done. This wasn't feeding. This was a message." Clay frowned. "What kind of message?" Silas stood, cracking his neck. "Territory claim. One of the old ones. Pack hunts in 3. First kill is chaos. Second is conversion. Third is war." Clay didn't know what to say. That night, as the fog crept back into Eureka like a ghost's breath, a scream echoed from the old Marlowe campground, 10 miles north. By the time first responders arrived, the camp was a slaughterhouse. 6 college students torn apart, tents shredded. One body hung from a tree 50 feet up. The trees around the site bore the same claw symbols found at the Caldwell home. Silas and Clay arrived before the feds could cordon off the site. Silas sniffed the air and stopped cold. This one's different. Clay watched him approach a tree where something was carved deep into the bark, a circle with 3 vertical slashes. Blood had been smeared into it like paint. "They're calling others," Silas whispered, "marking their land." "You mean there's more?" Silas looked at the circle, then back at Clay. "There's always more. This isn't just a kill. This is a summons." The camera flashes from crime scene investigators lit the forest in stutters of white. And for a moment, between the blinking lights, Silas saw something at the edge of the trees. A silhouette, too tall for a man, too quiet for a beast. Clay turned, flashlight cutting through the dark, but there was nothing there. Just fog. But Silas smiled, not out of joy, but recognition. "They're not running," he said. "They're watching." Clay shivered despite the heat. Back in his motel room that night, Clay couldn't sleep. His dreams were filled with long claws and yellow eyes, with a forest that breathed. And somewhere, far off, the low sound of something ancient returning home. At dawn, another call came in, a single word through the static of a landline before it cut out. "Help!" The address? 19 Rosedale Avenue. Clay dropped the phone. That was his parents' home. The road to Rosedale Avenue was drenched in a thick, unnatural mist. Clay gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white, the cruiser slicing through the dawn as if the fog were alive, resisting him. He had called dispatch. No response. Called his brother, who lived 5 blocks away, straight to voicemail. Then he'd called Silas. "I need you," Clay had said. His voice cracked like something inside him had splintered. Silas didn't hesitate. "I'm already in the truck." When they arrived, the house stood silent. No lights, no movement. The cruiser headlights cast long shadows against the porch, and the front door hung slightly ajar. Clay stepped out first, service weapon drawn. Silas followed, shotgun over one shoulder, bone knife at his belt. They entered quietly. The living room was untouched. The TV still on, flickering between static and a paused frame from an old Western movie. A cup of tea sat on the table, steam still rising. Whatever had happened, it had been moments ago. Clay whispered, "Mom? Dad?" He turned the corner into the hallway and froze. There, slumped against the wall, was his father, Douglas Mercer. His chest was shredded open, rib cage cracked apart like brittle wood. His eyes were still open, glassy and fixed on the ceiling. Clay stumbled forward, a strangled gasp escaping his throat. He dropped to his knees beside the body, reaching out with trembling hands. "No. No, no!" Silas moved past him silently, stepping over the blood trail that led deeper into the house. He didn't need to guess. The smell was stronger now, iron, sweat, and something fouler beneath it, a stink that clung to the air like rot. He found Clay's mother in the kitchen, or what was left of her. The kitchen tiles were slick with blood. Her body was sprawled across the floor, head twisted at an unnatural angle, jaw dislocated. Her left leg was missing below the knee. Not torn, severed. Silas muttered under his breath. This wasn't random. He turned, hearing Clay's scream from the hallway. Back in the living room, Clay held a bloodied scrap of paper. Written in jagged strokes, smeared with red, were 5 words. "He's part of us now." Clay looked up at Silas, his face pale, streaked with tears and blood. "What the hell does that mean?" Silas didn't answer. Not because he didn't know, but because he did. They buried the bodies behind the house before the authorities arrived. Silas insisted. The last thing he wanted was for the government to show up call this a bear attack, and shut down the investigation. That's how these things spread. Through silence. Afterward, they drove back to Silas's cabin. Neither spoke during the entire 40-minute ride. Clay's mind was shattered, stuck in a loop of memories and images too horrible to name. Silas finally broke the silence. "They're after you." Clay looked over, eyes hollow. "Why?" "Something in your blood. Something they want. You're not just prey to them, Clay. You're bait." That night, Silas opened an old trunk buried beneath floorboards in his cabin. Inside, leather-bound journals, maps stained with old blood, photographs of corpses with inhuman wounds, and a file labeled Red Moon Incidents, 1952 to present. He placed the file on the table and flipped it open. This town has seen this before. Back in '67, a logging crew vanished near King Range. They blamed it on a landslide. I found the bones 2 weeks later, every one of them hollowed out, marrow sucked clean. Clay stared at the photos, sickened. "They come in waves," Silas continued. "Always 3 at first, scouting pack, then more follow. They breed fast, hide in plain sight, and once they find someone like you." He pointed at a page labeled Blood-Bound Lineages. "They don't stop." Clay leaned over the map. "What's this mark?" Silas tapped a red circle near the forest border. "That's where we're going. Old logging cabin. Abandoned in the '70s. Locals say the land is cursed. I know better. It's a nest. We burn it out, we send a message." The next morning, they set out before dawn. Fog still clung to the treetops, thick and low like a ceiling of smoke. Silas brought his full kit: silver rounds, wire snares, salt bombs, and that ancient bone knife that never dulled. Clay carried his father's old revolver. It felt too small. They parked the truck 2 miles out and hiked in on foot. The woods were unnaturally silent. No birds, no insects, just the crunch of leaves under their boots and the distant sound of something breathing too slow, too deep. When they reached the cabin, it looked like any other abandoned structure. Roof half collapsed, door missing, moss crawling up the walls. But inside was something else entirely. Animal bones, hundreds of them, arranged in circles on the floor. Symbols carved into the wood. Scratches along the ceiling like something had tried to crawl out. In the corner, a rotting mattress. Chains on the floor, and a smell that made Clay cover his mouth. Blood, feces, death. Silas knelt by the chains. "They kept someone here, for a long time." Clay's voice trembled. "For what?" Silas stared at the blood-stained wall. "For turning." Suddenly something moved behind them. Fast. Too fast. Silas shoved Clay aside just as the wall exploded inward. The thing that crashed through wasn't a man. It had been once. Its clothes still clung to patches of flesh, but its face was gone, replaced by a snarling mouth full of teeth too long for its skull. Its eyes burned amber. Silas fired point blank. The shot tore through its shoulder, spraying blood across the walls, but it didn't fall. It lunged again, slamming Silas into the ground. Clay raised the revolver and pulled the trigger 3 times. 1 missed. 1 hit its side. The 3rd hit its throat. It staggered, dropped to its knees, and hissed. Then it laughed. That was the worst part. The thing laughed. And then it fled, crashing through the back wall and into the trees. Silas wiped blood from his face and stood. "They're toying with us." Clay stood frozen. "That was human." "Was," Silas said. "Not anymore." From the trees they heard another laugh, then another. Echoes in the fog. Silas reloaded. "We're not alone out here." Clay nodded, face grim. Then he said something Silas didn't expect. "They're coming for everyone, aren't they?" Silas didn't answer. He just lit a flare and threw it into the center of the room. As the cabin burned, something in the woods began to howl, and then another answered, and another. The flames from the cabin lit the sky in a deep orange glow, sending a plume of black smoke twisting upward through the fog-choked canopy. Clay stood with his revolver clenched in both hands, watching the forest beyond, waiting for something to move, to scream, to charge. Nothing came. Silas poured a line of salt in a circle around the dying embers. They won't cross this. Not tonight. But we need to leave before sunrise. Clay didn't move. That thing. It laughed. Silas nodded. They're evolving. They've watched us too long. They're not just hunting anymore. They're playing with their food. They drove back to town in silence. But the silence wasn't peace. It was anticipation. Something had shifted. The rules were different now. The creatures weren't hiding in shadows anymore. They were showing their teeth. By the time they arrived in Eureka, a crowd had gathered near the center of town. Police lights flickered blue and red, casting garish flashes over the storefronts. Clay jumped out of the truck as soon as he saw the ambulance. A teenage boy, maybe 16, sat on the curb, shivering and wrapped in a silver thermal blanket. His clothes were torn, his neck clawed open but not deep enough to kill. His name was Noah Salinas, one of 5 local kids who'd gone camping the night before near the Trinity River. The other 4 were gone. Clay knelt beside him. "What did you see out there?" Noah's lips trembled. His eyes didn't focus on Clay. He stared past him, as if something was still standing in the street. They were fast. They weren't animals. They were people. But not anymore. Silas approached and squatted in front of the boy. He held up a small silver medallion with a symbol etched into its center, a crescent moon split by 3 lines. "Did they leave this?" he asked. Noah's face went white. His breathing quickened. Then he nodded, slowly. "One of them dropped it. When it killed Wyatt." Silas stood. "They're leaving calling cards now. Like signatures." "Why?" Clay asked. Silas looked up at the sky. "Because they want to be seen." Later that evening, they met in the sheriff's office with Donahue, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. He slammed his hand on the table. "You expect me to believe this town's being hunted by a pack of monsters?" "No," Silas said coldly. "I expect you to get your people out of the woods, lock down every cabin and trailhead, and issue a curfew before more kids get gutted." Donahue grunted. "You're full of ghost stories, Weatherford." "We deal in facts." Silas leaned in, voice low. "Fact. I've buried 1,000 like them. Fact. They're real. And fact. If you keep treating this like vandalism, Eureka will be wiped off the map in 3 days." Clay added, "We're not dealing with wild animals. These things are organized. They mark territory. They plan their kills." "Then why the hell haven't you killed them yet?" Silas looked straight at him. "Because they're leading us somewhere, and we're about to follow." The next day, Harper Langston arrived in Eureka. He was a freelance journalist, known for covering unsolved crimes and vanishing towns. When the story of the Caldwell Farm massacre hit the darker corners of the internet, he packed his gear and drove from San Francisco without sleep. The first place he visited was the site of the campground killings. He parked his Jeep just off the trailhead, ignoring the caution tape, and walked in alone. The forest was silent, too silent. He found the remnants of the tents, soaked in dried blood and animal scat. Claw marks had torn through canvas and flesh alike. But what stopped him cold was the pattern in the dirt. Bones, small ones, laid out in the shape of a spiral. At the center, a chunk of meat. Fresh. Harper raised his camera, snapped a photo. Then something cracked behind him. He turned, fast. Nothing. Another sound. Breathing, deep and steady. But not his own. He turned again, and this time he saw it. Just for a second. A silhouette, 30 feet away, between the trees, standing upright, eyes like fire. Then it was gone. He ran, back to the Jeep. Tires spinning in the dirt, he peeled out and drove straight into Eureka, straight to the sheriff's office. Clay didn't recognize him, but Silas did. "I read your article on the Echo Lake disappearances," Silas said. "You got half of it right." Harper dropped the camera on the table, panting. "You know what's out there." "I've known longer than you've been alive," Silas replied. "I saw it. It looked right at me." "Then you're marked now," Silas said. Harper stared. Marked for what? Silas didn't answer. That night the fog was thicker than ever. The streetlights barely pierced it. Clay stood on the edge of town with binoculars, watching the trees. "They're watching us back," he muttered. Then his radio crackled. "We got movement. Main Street. Something just took out power to the grid." Silas was already moving. He loaded 2 cartridges of solid silver into the shotgun, checked the knife, then pointed down the hill. "They're not hiding anymore." Clay followed him, Harper trailing behind with nothing but his camera and fear. As they reached Main Street, the power snapped completely. Everything went black. Then a sound. No roar, no howl, just the screech of tires and the crash of glass. They turned the corner and saw the bakery's window blown inward. Blood smeared across the door. A man lay in the street, his chest torn open, and standing over him, hunched and massive, was one of them. Its skin stretched tight over muscle, covered in thick, mottled hair. Its jaws opened wide, lined with uneven rows of teeth. Yellow eyes flicked toward them. Silas raised his shotgun. But before he could fire, it darted down the alley and disappeared. Clay knelt by the dead man, trying not to vomit. Harper whispered, "Why didn't it kill us?" Silas turned to him. "Because it wants us to follow." The following morning, the town of Eureka woke to silence. Electricity remained out across multiple blocks. The phone lines were jammed. The mayor was nowhere to be found. And the body from the bakery had vanished before sunrise, leaving behind only a smear of blood and claw marks on the asphalt. Whatever took it didn't leave a single bone behind. Clay stood outside the sheriff's office, sipping lukewarm coffee, staring at the sky. The sun struggled to break through a ceiling of thick coastal fog. His eyes burned from lack of sleep. Beside him, Harper sat cross-legged on the steps, scrolling through the photos on his camera. "You get a clear shot of it?" Clay asked. "One frame. Blurred. But the eyes—" Harper turned the screen. The image showed just a sliver of the creature's face. Dark fur, elongated jaw, and 2 bright orbs of gold. It knew I was taking the picture. Inside, Silas spread out a map of Humboldt County across the table, weighing down the corners with silver shell casings. He marked several locations in red: the Caldwell property, the campground, Rosedale Avenue, and now, the bakery. "They're not moving at random," he said. "Each attack is tightening a circle." "A circle around what?" Clay asked. Silas pointed to the center of the red markings. A patch of dense forest on the outskirts of the Redwood National Park. "Whatever they're building up to, it's going to start there." Harper frowned. "But why? Why come back now? What do they want?" Silas looked at him long and hard before responding. "Blood, but not just to drink." He stepped away and pulled an old wooden box from under his coat. Inside were yellowed documents, hand-drawn symbols, and a photograph, black and white, of a church burned to the ground. In the foreground stood a group of men, all wearing long coats and holding weapons. One of them was a younger Silas, eyes burning even then. These were the blood-bound cases, he said. Rare families, specific lineages, people who carried the curse in their blood, not from being bitten, but born with it. It sleeps in them, sometimes for generations. But when it wakes, they don't turn into beasts. They attract them. Clay shifted uneasily, like a beacon. Exactly. Silas opened a folder and laid out a birth certificate. Clay read the name, Harper Michael Langston, born Crescent City, CA, 1988. What the hell is this? Harper asked. Silas flipped the page. Your grandfather, Robert Langston, disappeared in '59, presumed dead. But not before he led a cult of hunters who tried to domesticate the curse. Said they could train it, control it. He handed Harper a photo, an aerial shot of a burned compound in Northern California. At the bottom, Langston Estate. You come from a bloodline that was once worshipped by these things, and now that blood is waking up again. Harper's face went pale. That's why they're not killing me. They're waiting, Silas said, for the moon to finish rising. 3 nights, red moon. Tonight is the 2nd. Then what happens? Clay turned toward the map. You said the forest is the center of all this? Then we go in and end it before that final night comes. No, Silas snapped. You step in there now. You walk into their jaws. We wait for them to make the next move. They always come for the bloodline. Always. Before Harper could argue, Silas noticed something on the back of his neck. A mark. 3 vertical scratches, burned into the skin like a brand. Harper spun around. What is it? What do you see? Silas didn't answer. He just picked up the phone and dialed. That evening, they arrived at the home of Dr. Violet Redmond, a retired folklorist who once lectured on European pagan rites and American cryptids. She now lived alone in a stone cabin along the Lost Coast Highway, surrounded by rusted wind chimes and herb gardens that smelled like old rituals. Silas trusted her. They had history. Dr. Redmond welcomed them in, examining Harper's mark under a magnifying glass. She didn't flinch. It's not a wound. It's a glyph. Glyph? Clay asked. It's a summoning mark, she explained. An invitation to the blood rite. You've been chosen, not to be eaten, but to awaken. Harper stood abruptly. I didn't ask for this. I'm not part of whatever sick tradition they believe in. Redmond met his eyes. You don't have to be. The curse doesn't ask permission. She lit a bundle of dried sage and walked in a slow circle around him. The flames danced higher, then dimmed. Something inside you is stirring, she said. If you don't learn to control it, they'll take that choice from you. Silas pulled out the medallion he found at the last attack. Can we use this to track them? Redmond nodded. It's a focus piece, a link. If placed in salt, it can react to nearby energy from the pack. She set the medallion in a clay bowl, surrounded it with sea salt, and lit 4 candles around the table. The flame in the east candle suddenly turned blue. They're already near, she whispered. Within a mile. Clay grabbed his gun. They're hunting again. Then the lights went out. From outside came the first scream. They rushed to the window. A neighbor, an old man walking his dog, had been torn in half in the middle of the road. His body lay scattered, blood stretching across the pavement, and in the distance, barely visible through the fog, stood 3 shapes. Silhouettes, watching. Dr. Redmond whispered, They're not just here for Harper. Silas nodded grimly. They're here for all of us. Dr. Violet Redmond's cabin had turned into a war room. Salt lines were reinforced. Candles burned low, casting uneasy shadows that danced across the walls like flickering warnings. Outside, the fog thickened. pressing against the windows like a breathing thing. Clay stood guard at the front door with a shotgun across his chest, eyes locked on the tree line. Harper paced near the fireplace, sweat clinging to his neck. He hadn't slept in 36 hours. His skin burned, his hands shook, and his thoughts drifted toward things he couldn't explain. Dreams of running through trees, of howling at skies split by lightning. He was hearing voices now, not whispers, but something deeper, calls echoing through his spine. "You said they marked me," he said, turning to Redmond. "But what happens when the mark fully activates?" The old woman looked at Silas. Her silence said everything. "It's not just a mark," Silas finally said. "It's a key." "To what?" "To open something inside you," he said. "Something ancient, the part of your blood they want. And once it's open, there's no closing it again." Clay chimed in. "Can we stop it?" Redmond hesitated. Not without risk. The curse was born from a pact made centuries ago, sealed by bloodlines that passed it forward like a disease. Some resist it, others become it. "I'm not going to turn into one of them," Harper said, his voice thin with fear but wrapped in anger. "I don't care what's in my blood." "You may not get a choice," Silas muttered, "but you'll get a chance." Redmond handed Harper a small glass vial. Inside, thick, black liquid. "Drink this. It's an old extract, wolfsbane mixed with iron ash. It'll slow the change, not stop it. But it might give you enough clarity to fight." Harper looked at the swirling contents. It smelled like rust and sulfur. He downed it in one go and instantly collapsed to his knees. His veins burned, his head pulsed, his ears filled with screeches of things that weren't there. He blacked out. When Harper opened his eyes, it was still night. But something had changed. He could hear every breath in the room, every creak of wood, every insect crawling beneath the floorboards. The fire crackled so loudly it felt like thunder in his ears. Clay crouched beside him, a damp towel in one hand. "You were out for 2 hours, screaming the whole time." Harper sat up slowly. His joints ached, his vision swam, and his mouth tasted like copper. "What did I say?" Clay hesitated. "You kept calling a name, over and over." "What name?" He answered quietly. "Cypress." Harper froze. "That was my brother," he whispered. "He died when I was 12. In the woods, mauled. They said it was a cougar, but I never believed it." Silas appeared in the doorway. "Your memory's bleeding through. The curse doesn't just change your body. It digs up everything it needs to control you. Pain is the trigger. Then we need to find that forest," Harper said, "where Cypress died. That's where this started for me." Silas nodded slowly. "And that's probably where they'll finish it." The next morning, they drove north to the Redwood State Park boundary. The fog hung low, curling around the base of the trees. Silas had visited this area decades ago during a mass disappearance incident. No bodies were ever found. Only blood and bones. Harper led them through the woods, almost as if he'd been there before. He moved with confidence now, head up, breathing steady, as if the forest welcomed him back. The others followed in silence, guns loaded, salt satchels strapped to their belts. After 2 hours of hiking, they found it. A circle of blackened trees in the center of a clearing. Burn marks ran up the trunks. In the middle, a single rock jutted from the earth like a forgotten altar. Harper fell to his knees. "This is it," he said. "This is where I lost him." Clay knelt beside him. "Then this is where we fight back." Silas stepped forward, inspecting the ground. Tracks, dozens of them, massive paws, deep impressions. He looked up at the trees. Scratches ran higher than 15 feet, symbols carved in spirals. Some were fresh. "They've been nesting here." Then a scream shattered the silence. They turned just as Dr. Redmond's assistant, Reed Teller, came sprinting through the trees, covered in blood. One of his arms was gone. His face shredded. "They followed us," he gasped, before collapsing. Behind him, the first one emerged. It wasn't the same as before. This one was leaner, faster, with bones that stretched under torn skin and eyes that glowed white instead of gold. Clay fired, hitting it square in the chest. It staggered, then hissed, backing into the shadows. Then another appeared, then two more, encircling the clearing. Silas shouted, "Back to back, salt lines, now!" They poured salt in a ring and stood inside it. The creatures paced the edge, growling. Harper stood still, eyes shut, hands clenched. "I can feel them." "What are they saying?" Silas asked. "They want me to choose." "Choose what?" "To step outside." "No one steps out," Silas barked. Harper's skin rippled, his veins blackened for a second, his fingernails sharpened. Then, he grabbed Clay's hand. "If I turn, you shoot me." Clay nodded, eyes wide. "Don't make me do it." A howl rose from the trees, then another. The pack was gathering. Harper's eyes turned gold, and he smiled. The sun barely pierced the canopy above the redwood clearing. Harper stood at the center, his feet on the cold altar stone, sweat trailing down his temple as his body fought to stay human. Silas, Clay, and the wounded Reed surrounded him, salt line between them and the creatures circling just beyond. Then the first wolf charged. It broke through the fog like a bullet, long limbs, arched spine, mouth wide enough to snap a head clean off. Silas raised his shotgun and fired once, hitting the creature square in the side. The blast knocked it off balance, but it didn't stop. It clawed at the air, its eyes never leaving Harper. Clay stepped forward, fired two more rounds. One hit the beast's leg. Bone cracked. It collapsed mid-sprint and skidded into the dirt, thrashing until its breathing stopped. They didn't have time to celebrate. Two more came from opposite sides. The salt line flared as one tried to cross it. The moment its paw touched the white grains, it recoiled with a shriek, skin blistering. The other circled wide, trying to draw fire away from the group. "They're testing the perimeter," Silas said. "They know the salt works." Harper fell to his knees again. The transformation was pressing harder. His fingers spasmed, joints stretching, teeth aching as if something inside his jaw wanted out. Reed groaned from the ground, bleeding out, his breathing shallow. "They're waiting for the salt to break," Harper whispered. "They're waiting for me." Silas looked around, assessing the terrain. "We won't make it through the night out here." "Then we move," Clay said. "We fall back to the ranger station, 3 miles south. It's old, but fortified." "We move fast," Silas nodded. "And we carry him." They poured fresh salt over Harper's clothes, pressing lines into his skin like chains. Then Clay hoisted Reed onto his back, and they moved, tight formation, weapons raised. The forest wasn't quiet anymore. The wolves didn't hide now. They moved beside them between trees, flickering shapes just out of reach. Sometimes Harper swore he could hear their voices, whispering to him in a language made of blood and breath. They reached the old ranger station just before dusk. The place was a concrete relic, half collapsed, but still standing. Silas kicked in the door, cleared the rooms, and barricaded the windows with old steel chairs and filing cabinets. Clay poured salt along the doorframe, then shoved a desk against it. Reed lay unconscious in the corner, face gray. Harper sat on the floor, breathing hard, drenched in sweat. Silas lit a flare and tossed it into the fireplace. "We've got one night to survive this. Tomorrow's the 3rd moon." "The red moon," Clay added grimly. Harper looked up. "And then what?" Silas turned, voice low. "Then either you kill them, or they turn you into one of them." Harper clenched his jaw. I won't turn. Silas nodded. We'll see. Outside, the wind shifted, and the howling began. Not just one, dozens. The first attack came at midnight. They didn't knock. They crashed through the roof. A creature dropped into the center of the room, snapping its jaws toward Reed's body. Clay fired, hitting it in the side of the head. Skull shattered. It dropped. But more followed. One burst through the boarded window, tackling Silas into the hallway. They rolled into the wall, Silas jamming his knife under its ribs and twisting. It shrieked and clawed at his face, opening a long gash across his temple. Another came through the back door, having found a gap in the salt line. Harper saw it first. He didn't hesitate. He stood, half transformed, muscles twitching, and grabbed a broken metal pipe from the floor. As the wolf lunged, Harper met it head-on, slamming the pipe through its mouth and into the back of its throat. Blood sprayed across the wall. But it wasn't enough. More were coming. Silas threw Clay a flare. "Set the hallway!" Clay cracked it, tossed it into the narrow corridor. The bright light forced the creatures to back off, their eyes flickering in pain. Silas limped back inside. "We're overrun. They've been waiting for us to stop running." Then they heard it. A deep rumble from outside. Footsteps, heavier than the others, slower, intentional. Something massive was approaching. The creatures backed off the windows. Even they seemed afraid. Silas whispered, "Alpha." The front door buckled, then again. Then it exploded inward. The Alpha stood there, nearly 9 feet tall, black fur streaked with gray, claws as long as kitchen knives. Its face wasn't fully lupine. There was still too much human in it. The eyes were familiar. Too familiar. Silas whispered, "God help me." It was his brother, or what was left of him. "Ronan?" The Alpha growled low, then charged. Silas fired both barrels into its chest. The shots staggered it, tore holes into its body, but it kept moving. It tackled Silas across the room, smashing through a table, jaws snapping inches from his throat. Harper leapt, half-shifted, dragging the Alpha back with strength that wasn't fully human anymore. They crashed into the wall. Harper roared, veins bulging black beneath his skin. The Alpha slammed him against the bricks, but Harper didn't let go. Clay raised his revolver, but couldn't get a clean shot. Silas rolled over, bleeding. "Harper!" Harper's eyes flared gold. And then he stopped fighting. He looked into the Alpha's face and saw something. Recognition. The Alpha paused, breathing hard. Then it leaned closer, whispering something no one else could hear. Harper's expression changed. Then the Alpha released him and walked away, out the front door, back into the fog. Silas lay panting. "What did it say?" Harper didn't answer. He just stood there, shaking, staring at the empty door, and whispered, "It said I'm the next Alpha." The ranger station was in ruins. Silas sat slumped against the wall, blood soaking his shirt from the gash in his side. His breathing was shallow, rattling like old wood under pressure. Clay tended to the wound, but they both knew the damage was deep. Harper stood by the shattered doorway, staring out into the trees. The Alpha had walked away without killing them. It had whispered his name and left. No wolf would do that unless it wasn't finished with him. "They didn't come to destroy us," Harper murmured. "They came to test me." Silas coughed. "And you passed?" Harper didn't answer. The fog outside pulsed like a heartbeat. The red moon was rising. Clay tightened the makeshift bandage on Silas's ribs. "We need to get you out of here." "We need help." Silas pushed his hand away. "There's no help coming." His voice was steady, but it carried finality. "I've been doing this for 40 years, he said. "Killed more of them than anyone still breathing. But this This isn't just another pack. This is the start of something bigger. Harper turned. Then let's finish it. Silas chuckled dryly. You think that blood in your veins gives you control. You're just beginning to understand what's inside you. I won't become one of them. No, Silas said. You'll become something worse. Because you can still think. Outside, a distant siren wailed, then cut off. A scream followed. Then silence. Clay moved to the window. Downtown. Something's happening. They climbed into the old truck behind the station. Silas rode in the back, too weak to sit up. Harper drove. Clay rode shotgun, rifle on his lap. As they descended back into Eureka, the town was no longer just a town. It was a battlefield. Smoke curled into the sky. Storefronts were destroyed. Vehicles lay overturned, shredded as if by claws the size of machetes. Blood painted the streets. Bodies, some whole, most not, littered the sidewalks. But the worst part wasn't the destruction. It was the silence. Where the hell is everyone? Clay whispered. They stopped in front of the post office. The doors had been ripped off. Inside, a man sat slumped at his desk, eyes wide open, mouth stretched into a scream. Not a single wound on him, just dead. Frozen. Silas groaned in the back seat. Fear kills too. They heard the first howl moments later, then another. They weren't warning cries anymore. They were hunting calls. Harper stepped out, eyes fixed on the shadows. They're hurting the survivors somewhere. Silas nodded weakly. The church. What? Clay looked at him. They're old creatures, Silas rasped. They mock what we worship. Always gather their prey in places once used for prayer. They sped toward St. Augustine's, 100-year-old church at the edge of town. As they approached, they saw them. People, dozens of them, huddled inside the church, faces pale, crying quietly. And surrounding the building, wolves. At least 10, pacing in slow, deliberate circles, tails low, jaws dripping. One of them stood at the entrance. The Alpha. Harper parked the truck a block away and loaded a fresh clip of silver rounds into Clay's rifle. Silas tried to stand, failed. This is your fight now. No, Harper said. It's ours. He handed Clay the salt grenades. Use these if they swarm. Go through the side entrance. Get those people out. Clay nodded. And you? Harper looked back at the Alpha. I'm ending this. As Clay vanished into the shadows, Harper stepped into the open street. The wolves froze. The Alpha turned to face him. Harper walked straight through the center of the pack. None attacked. None even moved. They watched. Waiting. He stopped in front of the Alpha. You wanted me, Harper said. Here I am. The Alpha tilted its head. Then slowly, impossibly, it began to shift. Bones cracking, muscles twisting, hair retracting. And then a man stood before him. Tall, shirtless. Scars across his chest like claw marks from the inside. Long gray hair fell over sharp eyes. You have the blood, the man said, but not the will. Try me, Harper growled. The man raised a hand, and the wolves surged forward. Back at the church, Clay opened the side doors and began ushering people out 2 by 2, covering the exit with his rifle. Then he heard the scream. Silas. He turned back and saw 2 wolves dragging Silas from the truck. Silas fought them off with a short blade, stabbing one in the eye before the other sank its teeth into his leg. Clay ran, shooting one through the spine, then slamming the butt of his rifle into the other's skull. Silas collapsed, coughing blood. Get them out. I'm not leaving you, Clay said. You have to, Silas groaned. It's his time now. Clay turned back to Harper and watched him disappear into the fog, alone. The fog closed around Harper like a coffin lid. He stood alone in the street, face to face with the Alpha in human form. The other wolves had vanished into the mist, leaving only the two of them in a space between worlds, where breath hung heavy and the red moon bled across the sky like a fresh wound. "You feel it, don't you?" the Alpha said. "The rage, the hunger." Harper clenched his fists. "I feel the part of me that wants to rip you in half." The Alpha smiled. "Good. Then the bond is complete." Harper stepped forward. His skin rippled again. Black veins coiled under the surface. His bones ached with pressure. The wolf inside him screamed to be set free. "I'm not one of you," he growled. "No," the Alpha agreed. "You're the bridge between beast and man, between extinction and evolution. We are dying, Harper, but through you, we become something greater." He reached out a hand. Harper hesitated. Then he took it, but only to pull the Alpha close and bury a silver blade deep into his side. The Alpha screamed, thrashing backward, the wound sizzling. Harper tackled him, both men crashing into the pavement. They rolled, punched, clawed. The Alpha shifted mid-fight, his face elongating, nails turning to talons. Harper didn't shift fully, but his strength matched the creature's blow for blow. Behind them, Clay emerged from the church with the last group of survivors. He paused, eyes wide, watching the two figures locked in violent motion, unsure who was winning, unsure who was who. The fight spilled into the church courtyard. Statues shattered, gravestones cracked, blood sprayed across sacred ground. The Alpha bit into Harper's shoulder, tearing flesh, but Harper didn't fall. He roared, human and inhuman, and stabbed the silver knife again, this time into the Alpha's neck. The Alpha howled and collapsed. But before dying, he grabbed Harper's wrist and whispered, "This isn't an end. It's a beginning." Then he went still. The fog began to lift. Around them, the remaining wolves froze. They looked at Harper, and one by one, they bowed. Clay raised his rifle, confused. "What's happening?" Harper stood slowly, covered in blood, breathing hard. "They're not following the Alpha anymore," he said. "They're following me." Clay's hands trembled. "Then what are you now?" Harper looked at the full red moon as it sank behind the trees. "I'm the thing that hunts the monsters." Behind them, Silas lay on the steps of the church, blood pooling beneath him. Clay ran to his side. "Don't try to talk." Silas coughed blood. Too late for that. He reached into his coat and pulled out the old bone-handled knife. The one that had killed dozens of creatures across decades of war. He handed it to Harper. "Promise me one thing," he rasped. "Don't become what you have to kill." Harper nodded, took the blade. Silas exhaled, and didn't breathe again. 3 days later, federal agents sealed off Eureka. The official story: mass hysteria triggered by a viral outbreak. Survivors were relocated. All media access was cut. The town was scrubbed from the news. Clay disappeared after giving his final statement. Harper left the same night, walking alone through the woods. No car, no bags, just the blade. Months passed, then rumors began. In Portland, a man torn apart outside a nightclub. Witnesses reported hearing a low growl and seeing yellow eyes vanish into the dark. In Wyoming, a hunter found his cabin surrounded by salt circles he didn't remember making. But nothing entered that night. In Nevada, a silver knife was found buried in the chest of a creature no one could identify. The body vanished before authorities arrived. And in the redwood forest, when the moon turned red again, locals swore they heard howling. Not from the wolves, but from something that hunted them. A name began to circulate, not spoken aloud, but written in chalk, in carvings, in whispered phone calls to late-night radio hosts. Harper, not as a man, not as a monster, but something in between. A predator with human eyes, a hunter with blood in his teeth, the new alpha, the last hope, the final nightmare. Silas Weatherford's final stand in Eureka is a brutal reminder that even the fiercest hunters can be outmatched when the blood runs deep. The rise of a new alpha has only just begun, and we'll be watching closely to see what horrors awaken next. If you felt the fear creeping in as the fog closed around them, hit the like button, and let us know in the comments which moment shook you the most. Share this video with someone who needs to learn that some monsters wear familiar faces, and not all of them die. And if you've got the guts, subscribe to IMSAR Midnight Horror and turn on notifications, because surviving what comes next won't be easy, and you won't want to face it alone.